Okay, well, we will get started as Eileen just said. So first, again, welcome to everyone who's joined us. We're grateful that you joined us. We encourage you to, if you have questions or comments, feel free to pop those in the chat. Eileen and I will both be looking at that. You'll also have some time when we'll invite you to unmute and share any thoughts or ideas that you have. So I am Mary Jetter from Center for Educational Innovation, and today with me is
Eileen Alexander, also from the Center for Educational Innovation, which I still always want to call the Center for Teaching and Learning.
Yep. Okay. So Eileen, you want to go to the next slide?
I'm putting us. That's right. Mary and I are. These are slides we've both used in different versions with other people. So join us as we stumble a little bit with how to do this with each other.
Yep. And that's something that you might be experiencing this fall as well when you're doing your classes and just thinking about how we're going to do everything in our new context. So today we're going to talk about structuring an online discussion, and we're going to talk about it, thinking about it from the physically distant contexts that we find ourselves in. And it might be that your students are in the same classroom, but they're going to be physically distant. Or it might be that everyone is in their dorm room, their apartment, their home, wherever. So we're going to look at ways to really maximize the effectiveness and the usefulness of online discussions, because that is a big part of the online class experience.
And there.
Yeah, thank you. So things to think about as you're thinking about online discussions. The most important thing is to really think about what is the purpose or the role of the discussion given the aims of the class or a larger assignment. So we've listed here a few potential purposes that your discussion might fulfill. It might work as class preparation before or after an in-class session. So you might have the students do a discussion post prior to attending a lecture, be it face-to-face or online. You might have it as a reflective post discussion after a class. It could also be used to serve as a knowledge check before or during a class session. So, so what do you know about this topic? What are your ideas about this topic? It could also be a way to connect topics across several sessions. So you might ask students questions to help them make those connections between what we learned today and what we learned last week and what we might learn next week. And then finally, also engaging in authentic tasks. So the students could be skill building relevant to their field. In all of our fields, you have to be able to communicate effectively in a written format. So this can be a great way to also help students develop that skill of communicating clearly, effectively, and supporting what they have to say. So a lot of discussion posts look like this, and this has kind of been the traditional way that discussion posts have often happened. So the teacher or the student posts a question, and then student A replies to student B replies back to student A, or there might be posts within a group, but it's really very much post and respond, post and respond. And I think this is the type of discussion that students are used to, but maybe not super excited about because it has been done in this way so many times. So one of the things we're going to do today is hopefully give you some examples of some different ways you can use the discussion forums so that we don't fall into this repetitive post-respond, post-respond, post-respond.
We fall into that trap too, sort of feeling like we have to respond to everything, right? And
Yep.
That's never a good use of our time, and it's never a good model of learning.
Yeah, so some example prompts that you could use, some ways that you can get students involved is first just having general invitations in which the students can build community with each other, connect to your context, the context of the class. One thing that I'm a huge proponent of, if your class is going to be fully online, is having some community building discussion boards. And it could be, this week post a picture of your pet and tell us about your pet. Next week it could be post your favorite meme related to chemistry if you're a chemistry instructor or something. but just ways for students to have a little bit of fun, show their personality, and it really gets them engaged more in the class. And I think they start looking at those posts a lot more because they kind of want to see what, you know, Eileen's pet rabbit looks like. Eileen does not have a pet rabbit, for the record.
My neighbor does, and I often take care of it.
Oh, you do? Okay, I didn't know that. I just threw rabbit.
So there you go.
Came out of the hat. Okay.
And you got one.
Okay.
So one little thing I want to add here too with those general invitations. One thing about discussion forums and Canvas is that students can respond with an audio response as well as a video one in the discussion forums. I discourage people from the video because it takes up a lot of bandwidth and it doesn't always work, but the audio is kind of nice. And my faculty students have liked using that.
Yeah, I haven't played with that much, but that's another way to make people seem more real in the discussion posts. And kind of a sidetrack from that also, just asking students to have their Canvas profile completed. So having a picture of themselves, an avatar, their pet rabbit, whatever it is, just so there is that feeling of I'm talking to a person and not just a name on the screen. Another way you can do a discussion prompt, this is one of my favorite things to do, is what we call a 3-2-1. So the 3, you can ask your students to write down what are 3 scenarios or 3 ways that you could apply whatever it is that we've just discussed. The 2 assumptions that you can make about the situation in order to use the technique. Could also be 2 ways that you apply it. The 3 could be 3 things you learned. And then the 1, what's one difficulty or one question that you have about whatever that topic is, the topic, the technique, whatever. You can change these 3-2-1s up a lot and make the prompts a little bit differently. So for example, when I use it, I often do 3 things you learned, 2 applications, 1 question you still have. But here we have 3 scenarios when you could use it, 2 assumptions you have to make, 1 difficulty or question. So there is a lot of freedom that you can play with this. And then you could also invite students to try and answer each other's questions if that's what you have for their number 1 thing.
And this is my favorite point anyway, to point out our notes field is a good place to go to for further references. We link you there to some examples of 3-2-1 in activities in other disciplines, and also to some other ways that you can use what we call CATs, classroom activities or assessment techniques, to do a discussion prompt. So again, our resources are in our notes for the most part.
Okay, Eileen, over to you.
Oh yeah. Okay, so this is a format I have liked a lot. The 5 students to the post. It's called a quote analysis, and it engages students with reading. So this is a great strategy if one of the things you want to do is have your students think about how they read and have them learn how to read in your discipline, or read and respond to particular works in your discipline. The idea in the 5 students to the post is that you give people a prompt that's fairly open, but links to the readings, and ask them to engage with the readings, do some analysis, and raise a question. And instead of having that thing of 40, 60, 100 students, hopefully if you have 100 students in your class, you're doing small group discussions. But still, even having 20 students respond all at once is a lot to take in. So in this first 5 to the post, one of the strategies is to have 1 student reply and another student. So there are 5 people who begin it. You can do it with 3. Everyone else after that replies to one of these original posts. So the first 3 or 5 are the ones who start the discussion threads. In a sample from Mo Jansen, who is part of the Minsky system, teaches philosophy and is a UMin alum. She does this with controversial issues in her ethics class. It's a medical ethics class. So they're looking at the Tuskegee syphilis study, and what she asked them to do is explain why this experiment is wrong using one of the theories they've studied so far in class. So she really attaches it to the things that they've been reading and then follows it up with a prompt of the directions. The first people post that week, it's a whole week discussion, so they have time with it. And they write the quote analysis if they're one of the first people to post. This is what's included in a quote analysis. The sentences you're quoting and attribution to the quotes, author, page. It's not a formal citation she asks for, but name of the book, page, paragraph, or name of the document, paragraph. One or more of your own paragraphs, analyzing the quote, linking it to further thinking about the topic, 300 to 400 words, and it ends with a question. So when you're a responder to those first points, one of the things you do is raise a constructive criticism, or ask about an insight, or share another insight, another way of looking at it, a different perspective. And again, you follow up with your own analysis and think about what it is you've learned, point people in a new direction, and you raise another question. One of the nice things as a teacher is you are responding within those threads, and you're doing the work of synthesizing. You're maybe saying, hey, 5 of you really are talking about this same thing, but no one is picking up this thread in a 6th post. Let's take that on for the next level of discussion. For grading, that becomes easy. You can count the things that are done, or you could also do what Mo does, which is called pop grading. More about that in her paper. But in essence, pop grading is that students don't know when you're going to officially grade them using the formal rubric. They know you will do it twice, but they don't know when. One of the things Mo has found is that students actually keep up a really engaged pace because they don't know when, and they like this format too. She has a random pattern for responding, so someone could get graded 2 times in a row. They don't know that. It works out quite nicely. So that's the 5 to the post. And again, there's a resource in there that includes descriptions of the assignment, some sample grading criteria, and also how to do the pop grading aspect to keep faculty sane in doing this. One of the really nice things I've found in using it is at the end of a thread, I can have students go back into the thread and summarize what they learned, sort of a 3-2-1 to wrap it up. What are 3 things I now know and can explain to others, 2 ways that this will impact their understanding, and 1 take-home message that I want people to have when I talk to them about this. And then I can grade those responses for the entire thread. Usually I use a check or a plus. So that's 5 to the post. Anything we should address here with these first 2 before we go on to a couple more? Anything you want us to address, either chat or grab the mic if there's something you'd like us to clarify, take on, say more about? All right. It's also a great way for me to take a drink of my coffee. All right, I am doing the next one, so I will carry us on and rearrange my screen ever so slightly. All right. This one is a group post, and this was invented, I'm sure by lots of people, but at the University of Minnesota, I attribute it to Amy Pettinger, who is part of pharmacy and on the Twin Cities campus has been part of the faculty consultative committee and chaired the provost search. So there are a couple of things I'm going to leave unaddressed here fully because Amy has not written her follow-up article to this. She's been just a little busy, as she said. So in this one, Amy sets up groups, and she calls them groups in this case. They're base groups, people who they check in with, but they have low stakes work that they're doing together. It's not a formal high stakes team. So these are groups, and what they do is get a set of readings that they work through each group, and they come up with a summary that they share with the class. That's the gist of it. So for example, in this setup, students discussed, debated, and summarized a current hot topic in healthcare. So again, this is hot topic, kind of like Mo and Mara Lee did with the 5 to the post. The teacher provides some background information linked to the topic. There's an online lecture, some follow-up readings, and a discussion prompt that's related to get them to go somewhere in a new direction to a public audience to talk about this. Each student is required to bring in one non-assigned source to support their stance, and the students post in a discussion forum for their group 100 words 3 times a week to contribute and grow the discussion. So how does all this get managed, you might be asking? You know, what's the teacher's role? That's a lot to do. Well, what's lovely is that Amy's thought about how to have students learn how to collaborate and provide leadership. So all group members are responsible for this collaborative writing. And the 3 times a week, 100 words is to build the ideas that they will share in a collaborative document. And in that group, each week, there's a student leader who's responsible for finalizing and nudging and reporting to the group members. And in that case, that person doesn't have to contribute the extra article, just reads the assigned stuff, looks at things that the teacher has provided, and does the work of wrangling the summary. These summaries then are shared with the full class, and they have a synthesizing conversation about the core issues and the varying responses. So what's nice is each group that's mindfully chosen comes up with a way of looking at the same materials, and it enriches and opens up the discussion. So I heartily endorse this view, this approach as a way to, again, help teachers watch what's happening, but also teach and coach people how to do this. In other disciplines, I've watched people do the thing of studying particular artifacts and coming up with an analysis of them and doing the review in essence, and then sharing that and thinking about how would they review this piece or these pieces were they to write one review from the whole class. So it's adaptable to some other class formats. All right. Are you with us? I get to look at your faces now and again, see if there are any questions we should answer before. I think I have one more and then it's Mary's turn. All right. As I keep talking, I will do that. Finally, discussion forums can be a great place to do peer review. Now, Canvas has a way to do peer review. Some people find it clunky and some people like it a lot. I'm someone who finds it clunky. So one of the things I do is I have my students use Google Documents to share their work and set up in an online space, either a Google Meet or a FaceTime or whatever works for them to get together and talk. And I do this in groups of 3. It makes it possible to share the work and actually listen more carefully. I'll say more about that in a minute. So again, Canvas makes this possible. It can be clunky. It's something to learn for you and the students. I've opted for using Google Documents because it feels more authentic. It's what I do all the time. It's how they're probably going to communicate when they're outside of class. So they share a Google document with their peers and with me, so we can all comment and edit. Works quite nicely. They can upload it as an assignment still for me in the Canvas setup. So those 3 roles. In one version, if they're working on something that they're authoring, person 1 could be the author. Person 2 would be asking some questions because they've all read it, and person 2 has gotten some questions from peer 3, so is asking the questions, and peer 3 is taking notes while they're talking, because the person who's hearing their paper talked about, the author, gets to listen, and the third person gets to take notes. It can be really helpful to step back and just listen to what people say about your paper. This is the writing teacher in me coming out. And then all 3 of them come together before they move on to the next paper and talk about what might be the author's next steps. Then they switch roles and, you know, someone else becomes the author and someone else the questioner. Another way to do this is to have the person if they're doing it entirely online, person 1 says, here's my paper, here's my revision memo, and there's an example of a revision memo in the notes. Peer 1 does a response, or Peer 2 does a response, Peer 3 does a response, and then they all go in and look at all the responses and take some next steps and synthesize those responses. So this very first one, this one, to use my little pointer here, is great when you can do something that's face-to-face. This second one is great when you're doing text-only feedback. And I think, yes, that's the end of these particular slides. And we turn it over to Mary. So I do want to see if there are questions we should address. I'm just scanning the chat. And I will encourage you to grab a mic if you want to. Mary and I are perfectly content talking. She smiles at that remark. Okay, I am going to return us to our view and let Mary carry on. I think we're at the right slide and you can still see it. Yes, Mary? Oop, you're muted, Mary.
Oh, sorry, I muted so you didn't hear me say goodbye to my kid when he left to go back. Or the dog barking or the cat meowing, because that's my life right now. Probably like many of you working from home. So we're going to talk now about jigsaws, which are one of my favorite activities to do in a face-to-face class, but it's also something that we can do in an online class. So just to do something a little different right now, what I would like you to do is go into the participant tab and click on either yes or no if you've ever done a jigsaw activity before. And it could be face-to-face or it could be online. So give everyone a minute or two to do that. So again, just go into the participant tab and click on yes, I've done one, no, I haven't. Okay, about 10 more seconds. We have 15 respondents so far. 16. Okay, so it's pretty close. 9 of you have checked yes, I've done one. 7 of you have checked no, I haven't. Just as an aside, this is something you can do with your own students when you just want to take the temperature on something, see if they're understanding it, see if they want to talk more about a topic. So just using these yes, no buttons are a really great way to just get some interaction going with your students in the class. I also see a few yeses and nos in the chat there, so great. Okay, I'm going to clear all of those out and let's talk a little bit more about jigsaws. So jigsaw activity is really, like you might understand it to be, a puzzle in a way. So traditionally the way it's done is you have focus groups, or some of the research and some of the articles I've read call them expert groups. But the students in that group all read something that's the same, have questions, discuss about it. But the goal is that they're going to be responsible for whatever content it is that you've assigned to that particular group. One way I've used this in my own classes is when I teach a class for the International Teaching Assistants. When we talk about classroom management, I give students 4 different articles related to classroom management. So in step 1, they read it before they come to class. Step 2, in class, they discuss it, kind of come up with what they think are the most important themes that they would like to share with the other students. And then step 2 is the task groups. Or the jigsaw groups, this can also be called. And this is where the groups get mixed up. So you have one person from each group, and they share their ideas and insights, whatever, from each other. And it could be to address a common task. It could be to come up with kind of a big picture of what are some, for example, classroom management issues you might encounter and how might you respond to them. And then you can also have the students get back into their focus groups or their expert groups again, in which they can share anything that they might have learned about their own topics. So if I'm presenting to my group about, what do you do with students who have plagiarized, they might have gotten some good insights from each other in the mixed up groups, in the task groups, the Jigsaw groups, so they can come back together and share those with their original groups. I really like Jigsaws, and this is something, again, I've done face-to-face, but this is something you can also do online. So again, it takes a lot of setup, so you'd have to have the students read something in advance. They could either do a discussion board post in which they kind of agree on the main points of their article. They could talk about it together in Zoom. In the task groups, they could each be set up as a discussion board or as one group within the discussion. The person who is responsible, so for example, person one would need to enter a summary and then add a question that they would like the group to think about and respond to. And then all of the other students would do that too. And then again, they could come back as in the refocus groups or their expert groups again and discuss what they learned from their peers.
And I add one thing from doing this with graduate students in the spring. It's a great activity to do in asynchronous and synchronous mode. So we did the focus groups, and the students designed this because that's their task, was to design a teaching session. And the way they designed it was that the focus groups did all of their work in a Google document that they could all share, and people could go back to. When we did our synchronous class session, we broke into groups. We did the mixing of people together so they could talk about their pieces, and people added notes back into their original section so that when they got back to the refocus, which they did again offline, they were able to answer their question. And these students set it up as, here's some information we need to know as teachers. Let's talk about that more deeply and think about how it applies to the courses we're designing. And the last part was people individually saying what it is they were going to apply from that discussion to their own class. And it worked nicely online and both the synchronous and asynchronous modes. Shall I go to the next one, Mira?
Yes, please. Yeah, so some other ways you could do a jigsaw. So thinking about having students take different perspectives. So for example, if they're talking about water pollution or a muddy river, so take the perspective of the farmers, take the perspective of the land and the city developers, take the perspective of nature. How does nature contribute to this? So rather than doing a debate, they could do it as a jigsaw in which each person present, first groups might discuss what is the farmer's perspective on this, what is Mother Nature's perspective on this. And then in their jigsaw groups and their mixed groups, then they could share their different perspectives and really learn from each other that way. They could also analyze a research article in different groups and then come together and see what they all think about it. Another thing you can do with jigsaws, I was discussing this with a faculty member last night that I was talking to. He has a class of about 200 students in about 35 groups, and he wanted them all to do group presentations online. And I was able to persuade him that having 35 groups do presentations might not be the best use of everyone's time, especially when there's like 5 groups doing case 1, 5 groups doing case 2. So what I suggested to him too is just to use this jigsaw format and have the students do their presentations in small groups to each other, rather than everybody sitting through 5 explanations of case study 1 by 5 different groups. So there's a lot of ways you can use this, and Zoom makes it really easy. If students log in advance and you have the groups pre-assigned, it's something that you can do. So next slide, please, Eileen. And then in building and analysis. So here, so there's 4 different readings with a task to build understanding. And the goal is to report or explain something to a new audience. So I think it's Eileen's students who maybe talked about aspects of grading, major types of assignments. So the focus group would again analyze something. Then the task group gathers the new information in which they consider what they need for the context. And then again, they will refocus, weigh options, and make recommendations. So you could also do a jigsaw in that way. Eileen, do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, one of the things that's different about the way we've set this out from other resources is often people stop at 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. They do the, let's talk about this one thing, now let's mix it up and you learn more. And I've always had the response from undergraduate students as graduate students, so now what do I do with this? You know, I've got some new information. So I like to have the refocus where there's a specific task in there. I think one of the things about having this third one is it, again, does perspective building, and the intent of jigsaws, they were originally designed in Texas post-desegregation to have students learn how to talk to each other across their differences. They were meant to be something that would get teachers and students to think about what it was to have different perspectives and how to draw on those perspectives in order to build a more complex response. So I like bringing in this third part, the refocus, to say, so what is the more complex understanding you've gotten to, instead of somebody wins or somebody loses, or, you know, I understand my original article better. I don't really understand yours, but I understand mine better. So the third one comes back to, how do we understand all of these as we talk about our own starting place?
Yeah, and just to add, so in the notes from the slides, you'll see there's a link to jigsaw.org, which is a really great site that talks you through a lot of different ways you can use jigsaws. There's a whole section on using it to reduce prejudice in the classroom. There's some great links to other resources, for example, Jigsaw materials for teaching English as a second language. So we definitely recommend that you check that out. So before we move on, let me ask the question again, but with a slight twist. So how many of you think you might want to try a jigsaw activity in the fall semester? So again, use the yes, no buttons in the participants tab. How many of you think you might want to try one? Okay, I see some, maybe. I didn't really give you the maybe option, so thank you to the person in the chat.
There is no in there for, you know, yeah, not sure.
Yeah, I should have used the coffee cup or something for not sure, but yeah, so it looks like we have within the participant panel, 12 people would like to try one. Then we have a few other people who've posted that they would, or they might in the chat. If you do have questions or just want to brainstorm ideas about how to use this in your class, please feel free to reach out to Eileen or me. We're happy to chat with you and help you work through kind of figuring out the logistics and what the questions might look like if you need any support with that.
And with all of them, part of the thing in thinking about using discussion boards is, I think, how to think through them in a way that helps students to develop their thinking. They're not that line them up and answer means I have an answer now. The other models were suggesting take a little longer time. You can spread them over a week or 2 weeks. They can do it alone. They can do it together, and really give them a chance to build in the reflection and the thinking and seeing what others have to say. So it's a great way to engage content. It's a great way to practice the reading and writing in your field and really gain some comfort and fluency with talking about the topics. Little features that you can use along the way. You know, Mary's mentioned a couple too. Sometimes I ask my students when they're doing their jigsaws to post their responses in a discussion forum, but they can't see other people's responses until they post. So they can't say, I agree with what Mary said. It would have to be, here's what I'm thinking, which helps get at that wider array of thinking. So there are ways you can manipulate the discussion forum too, to encourage some posting of original ideas and then commenting on what you see there. It's something that people use in the 5 to the post as well. All right.
Okay, yep. So let's move on to our next topic here, which is responding online. What are our roles and what are the responsibilities that the students have for each other? So next slide, please. So one of the things that I think is always a bit of a struggle is how, and I've heard this from many faculty members, how do we get students to actually respond with comments that aren't just, I agree, good point. So what can we do to encourage higher level comments from our students so that they're truly interacting with each other and learning from each other? Some things to talk with your students about, just in terms also of some etiquette with the discussion boards. It's important to be able to disagree, and you can disagree while also identifying common ground. So you could say, yeah, I agree with you on this. However, I think this is maybe, so I would do it differently. And that is also then providing an alternative perspective. Well, what about thinking about it this way? You could also have students, if they want, just to agree and then add another reason or evidence in supporting of that point. So instead of saying, I agree and here's why I agree with this, or here's why I think this is a good idea, or here's some additional evidence that shows this works or this is true. And then also asking a probing or clarifying question. And that's something that you can also have your students end their post with. So whoever does the initial post asks a question that they would like the others to respond to.
I'm typing and I'm going to move you ahead. I heard that pause.
Yes, okay, yep. So here are some example responses to posts. So if you do just have, again, kind of the simple factual post, well, what additional evidence is there to support your thinking about this? What assumptions are we making? How would our interpretations be different with a different set of assumptions? What don't we know about X, and how might that help us consider this issue in another way? Can you articulate your point in another way or provide an example to clarify it? How else might you interpret X? And I think giving students some examples of these kinds of questions that can be asked can be really helpful for them too in thinking about how to ask good questions of each other and have substantive responses to each other. I think providing those models can be really helpful because a lot of times students just don't even know how to respond in an in-depth way, or how to respond in a way that furthers the conversation rather than just keeps it at the point that it's at.
One of the things I've really learned in this swift conversion, even though I taught online and I tried to do this before, is that when I talk about posting what people would post, also, as Mary said, give them tips in the discussion forum on how to reply. So your reply might take the shape of, you might want to point to additional evidence. I give them some suggestions in how to reply to each other in a particular post. Those are things I would say out loud if we were having a discussion in class, right? So let's hear from some more of you about X, Y, and Z. Those are the kinds of things that you might say in a face-to-face class that you can turn into guidance in the discussion forum instructions that you set up ahead of time. We also had some a note in the chat about wanting some ideas on how to, I'm going to go back to the previous slide, slide 21, ask those questions. And I will add some resources into slide 21 after we wrap up, because we have some new and some ongoing good ones from doing a seminar this, multiple versions of a seminar this summer. And I will also say the citation, whoops, I need to grab the pointer. This article is great, and the citation is in the notes. It's a really strong one for giving examples about inclusive teaching and strategies for asynchronous learning, including discussions. Okay, so Mary, I think I need to go on to, yes?
Next slide. Yes, next slide. Okay. So I'm thinking about kind of the big picture moderating the discussion board. So what is your role? How are you going to do this? The most important thing I would say is to be present, but as the last bullet point here says, don't dominate. It's important for students to see that you're there, to see that you're paying attention, but keeping in mind that you don't need to respond to everything, because that can be a huge time suck. And it's also not just always a great use of our time, and there might not be a lot to respond to. So when you're thinking about feedback, you could be doing feedback to individuals, you could be doing feedback to the group, you could do some general feedback to the whole class. After you've read through the discussion posts, you could record a short video and highlight some of the key takeaways from the discussion boards. It's also important to have a consistent rhythm so students know when discussion posts are due, when they can expect that you will look at them, but also have a variety in terms of the types of things you have students do on the discussion board. So it's not always the post respond to one of your friends or one of your classmates, but having a rhythm, but then also having different sorts of tasks that the students do.
One of the things we keep emphasizing is we have course aims, but remember that discussions have aims too. A class session has an aim, a discussion board has an aim, and that's part of what you can convey in your moderating strategies and setting out what people are about to do, which helps you figure out what you're looking for, which helps you figure out how you're going to moderate and how you're going to respond.
Yeah. Addressing people by name, that's something that's, I think, really important. Again, it makes you seem more human. It makes everyone seem more human to each other. So when responding to the post, that's a great idea, Eileen. I'm really glad you posted that. But using names is very powerful. Trying to involve all students. If you do see students that are not participating as much, ask them a question in the discussion board. It could be, hey, Mary, what do you think about this? Did you, just something along those lines to let them know that you're paying attention, and to try to draw them into the conversation. Eileen?
That with each other as well. One of Mo's favorite strategies, and she says this in every one of her discussion forums, is you will always get bonus points from me when you respond to the posts that nobody's gotten to yet because they came in at the last minute. She makes it clear that they're part of the responsibility is responding to everybody, and making sure they distribute their responses. And she also says, don't forget to call people into the conversation who you've heard from on this topic before and you would value their input. So you can end a discussion post saying, hey, Mary, Jane, and Roger, you've all talked about this before. I'm curious to know what you and others think about this. So students can call people into the conversation as well.
Yeah, and again, then the last one here, facilitate, don't dominate. And along those lines, you don't have to grade everything. You don't have to respond to everything. Thinking about what are your goals for this assignment, for this discussion assignment. What do you need to do to help make sure those goals are met? For example, we've been doing the online course design seminars this summer, and when I've been moderating groups, I don't respond to everything. Usually I just respond kind of here and there where I see a few gaps being made. But I often find that the discussion becomes richer when people aren't waiting for the facilitator or the teacher to jump in and keep the discussion going.
My strategy has been to tell the people in the online course design seminar, we know kind of when they're going to post. And I tell them I will go through and read and like every post that I'm reading and I'm taking notes on, but I will not post until they've extended the conversation by talking to each other. So they know I'm there. I always put the like button on, and I've noticed that they do that more and more too. They still reply to people, but the like button is also there. And that's been my way to signal, yep, I'm here. I see what you're saying, and occasionally provide little things if I'm seeing in that quick read through, oh, it would be good to provide this resource, or oh, here's a common thing that I can address that will help people out.
Any questions before we move on?
a comment. 225 students. Oh, yes. So has anyone else done the FAQ? And yes, it can be done in Canvas. I'm reading a comment. That worrying about posting wrong information. Others of you who've used FAQ, I would love to have you chime in, especially in a large class, but in any size class. One of the things we've done in the seminars with the FAQ is we have a team, which would be like having a teacher and TAs, and the team is the one who responds there. And that's just become a norm so that we can provide a response. Are there others of you who've tried the FAQs? You can add something.
I've done it with my class, and I haven't found that students were jumping in to answer each other's questions. A lot of the time they weren't even looking at the FAQs unless it was that, unless it was that person who had posted a question and was waiting for a response.
And one teacher I know uses the FAQ, or sets up an FAQ discussion forum for before the semester begins to ask questions about, things that are coming up. And as the semester begins, actually closes it for comments by redoing the discussion prompt that says, for questions about how things work, please email me, and the address is there, and I will update this FAQ with a response. So using the email as a way to get the information to the teacher, who then updates that FAQ rather than having the students do it. So you can close something for comments, but you can continue to update what's there. That's another way to do that workaround. Either way, if a student adds something there, you're going to get an email. So I think the thinking for my colleague was, I might as well get an email. I can answer and get the right information together and then put that in the FAQ. Some people do it by providing a document that they link to on the homepage. Send me an email and I'll update the FAQ, might be on the front of the homepage as a way to get people to ask questions and know that they get answered. I kind of like having the discussion forum idea because it's more obvious. And you can have students subscribe to the forum too. And Becca's saying, letting students know I will check at specific time intervals. Yep. And one nice thing is with that, you have, you could also say, and I will look at the responses and condense them all or edit them all so it's easy to read. You do have that editing capacity, and if that's part of your role and you share it, that might be a way to deal with a misinformation in an elegant way. Other kinds of queries before we're going to wrap with assessment. Some suggestions there. All right, let's go there, Mary. I think it's okay. Me. So for assessment, we've offered 6 questions: the who, what, when, where, why, and how. That would be me. I tend to think in that mode. And it's really important to think about who participates in assessment. So in the model of 5 to the post, one of the things that Marley and Mo do is have students participate in the assessment by doing a reflection and a self-assessment. What was your role? How did you participate? What are the things you helped other people learn? So they're participating in the assessment. In the group one that Amy Pettinger does, because it's a group, she can use a quick little checklist about how do group members do, and the team leader fills it out each week. So that team leader's participating in the assessment. Often it's us who are participating in the assessment. And we can do that by looking at quantity or quality, and we get to make some decisions about that. We can also ask students to do that self-reflective piece about how they grew in their response capacities over to discussion forums, and grade that early in the beginning of the course rather than the forums themselves. A key part of this is really to think about, what do you mean by participation? Is participation the 200 to 300 words? Is it raising one really good question? Is it being there 3 times during a session? And one of the resources we share here is a participation rubric to help you think about what that looks like, about what constitutes participation. It's a group rubric designed by a Twin Cities-based faculty member who used to be at the U. And it's really nice at setting out in a positive way what participation looks like. One of the key assessment things too is to think, and Mary's alluded to this, when do you offer feedback that's growth related? So is your discussion one that you're using in order to have students practice learning? In which case your feedback and assessment is, you're really starting to get these ideas. Here's where I'm seeing things work. Here's a check, a plus, or a minus. And usually a check or a plus works in those cases because you're encouraging people to move forward. The other way to be looking at an assessment in this is not that it's growth-minded feedback, but they're demonstrating their learning, which is one of the things that group sharing of a summary is doing. They're demonstrating their learning within particular guidelines. So that one is more of a, here's the criteria and you met them and here's your grade. And again, why provide criteria and or a rubric? And this goes back to the points we were making about criteria includes how to post. A rubric can include, what do you say in response to something, and why do that? It's for clarity and unhiding. This is new to students, writing and doing all their teaching in an online space. It's also new to us. So the more we're clear about what it is that constitutes a discussion in this online space with criteria or a rubric, I think the anxiety gets lessened all the way around. I know when I started adding in, here's what a good response looks like, or here's what an engaged response looks like, with faculty and students, people were more relaxed about doing the replying because it was clear what they were needing to do, and it was in terms of communication and not about supplying an answer I was looking for. So criteria can also be about helping people be more human in the practice that they're doing at articulating things, or in the demonstration they're doing by pulling ideas together. Which comes to how to grade. Again, think about why that discussion is there. Is it there to help students practice, gain fluency, gain comfort, exchange ideas? Is it there in order to share in a public way an insight, an answer to a question, like a case study that you want them to resolve, or a group synthesis project that you want them to share? And finally, where does SpeedGrader fit into this? I love SpeedGrader. I love SpeedGrader because if I'm reading the discussion forum posts and I know they're doing good work, I can go to the grade section and just give them all the 1 point they get. That's usually my grade mark for a discussion. But I can also in SpeedGrader, because I've set up my discussion as an assignment, which is the key thing to remember to do if you want to grade a discussion. So when you set up the discussion to mark it as something graded, I can go then into SpeedGrader and I can read each student's individual response, and I can give them some comments in a private way about their responses and coach them to say something differently, or coach them to go look at other posts in that same thread. I can also say, this is great. It was really brave of you to add this particular point. It was really helpful for you to add these particular points. So SpeedGrader becomes another way to personalize that connection and let people know that you're reading without necessarily saying it in the discussion forum itself. Because SpeedGrader has that little space where you can add comments as well as do the grade. So I've really liked SpeedGrader a lot for personalizing my responses to students.
And just to jump in also with SpeedGrader, you also have the option of doing video and audio feedback as well, which is also kind of a fun way to mix things up for your students.
Yep. And just one caution, people have reported still on too many occasions that the video doesn't upload. Audio seems to work really well consistently. The video within SpeedGrader can be a little spotty even with good Wi-Fi. So check out in a low stakes way if it's going to work for you at home. I've had people contact me in frustration and that's not fun for them. All right, so that's our look at assessment kinds of things. And what we really have next are, here are our resources and a chance, as we're in the last few minutes, to see if there's something that you would like from us by way of a discussion here, or a resource that we can point to. And I've already noted that I will add, for myself, that I will add some sample discussion prompts to slide 21. So either with chat or grabbing the mic, let us know if there's something else that you would like. Yep, let me put it on the presentation link back in. I think it's still in my memory. Yes, there. The slides, thanks for that prompt. And again, the notes field has many things that you can go check out. We also have a resource that isn't listed on these that I will add to it, that provides some guidance on setting up discussion, so I'll add it in here. All right, should we go on to the last part, Mayor? I think Mary, are you there? You're muted, that's all.
Muted, yes, I'm here. Okay, yeah.
I was like looking for your picture and not hearing your voice. It's like, no. Okay.
I'm here.
So, as always, whether it's a more presentation-oriented webinar or a highly interactive webinar, we appreciate your feedback, and that will be the link that you can use. Tomorrow, you will get an email from our maven of all things that keep us organized, Janelle. It will have a link to this recording and to the slides and to this survey feedback. I'm also noticing there are a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, so looking at the question, Ange or Ang, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, so I apologize if I have mispronounced it. I think for having students work in small groups, one thing that's really important is to give them in-class time to work, especially right now as everyone is in different locations, different things happening in their lives, especially at the beginning of a project or an activity, having in-class time so they can get to know each other and then maybe figure out some times that might work is really important.
Yeah. Yep. With my graduate course, because they were doing teamwork, we had done some of that early on before we made the transition, but our first 2 synchronous sessions, I included time. We met for 75 minutes instead of 3 hours, but 20 minutes of that was, no, it was a half an hour, was a check-in where they were in their small groups, their teams, and I could go from team to team and check in. I also set up some individual conference times with them the 2 weeks ahead of their presentations. So we did it online. That was really important. And it actually, my graduate students told me it kept them on task to know that I was there at appointed times to answer their questions. So like Mary said, it was a way to encourage presence, but also it was a bit about responsibility and not letting the side down. And they got something very specific out of it, which was my undivided attention, which was something they desperately needed in order to stay on task.
The other thing I'll say is on August 5th, we are doing another workshop on online team activities and assignments. I put the link to the page, the CEI page about it. So if this is something you're interested in talking more about, I encourage you to join us on August 5th. I'll be doing that with our colleague, Alyssa Banak.
And there are so many good workshops that will come up
yes.
again at the end of August. We are back to doing our teaching enrichment series virtually at the end of August. And in the meanwhile, we're both happy to answer any questions that you might have. We like talking teaching.
Mhm.
Okay, that's our official close of the session. So thank you all for letting us share some ideas. And we look forward to hearing how it goes for you.
Thank you.